Salve, salve rapaziada, VDK de Parte V aqui trazendo mais um vídeo pra vocês. Então vamos lá, turma. Vamos continuar o exame aqui. Então se inscreve no canal, deixa o like, compartilha e é nóis. A gente vai ter que ir lá no porão pegar uma faca de serra. Peguei a chave aqui já.
Fuck. Why did the prison convoy have to get into an accident? Jack, take a deep breath. Deep, pleasantly cool breath. Nearly finished with the autopsy.
Aê.
Then you can go home and rest. I'll take the saw. Fuck! It's jammed! Doesn't anyone do maintenance around here? Damn hatch. Damn red Pete. Will I never again? Will I? If only. Forgot this thing was standing here. It would be easier if I put things away properly. Damn student lectures and their fucking props.
Depois eu venho aqui. O cara fica alucinado, velho. Aí é foda. Agora vi o rosto dele, ó.
Sorry for the short interruption. I hope you all took the opportunity to grab some coffee. And now that I have everything I need, I'll move on to revealing the spinal cord. The spine is removed. I need to take my pills now! Not looking to overdose. I've already taken my pills. Not looking to overdose.
Cara, tem que ficar na base do remédio.
I can see that the spinal cord was not severed. This shows that apart from the marks around the neck, hanging didn't negatively affect the condition of the deceased. Ladies and gentlemen, almost over. Now, to sum up and tidy away the body. The direct cause of Samantha Barker's death was a heart attack resulting from an overdose of barbiturates. Traces found on the body suggest that the overdose was a deliberate act, following a failed attempt to hang herself. The autopsy found no evidence or genetic materials indicating that death could have been the result of an attack. Third-party involvement must be excluded. Autograph, and we can start sewing. In the 1950s and 1960s, the use of barbiturates for suicide was actually quite common. I think it was most talked about after the death of Marilyn Monroe. At home, it was a help and comfort. On death row, a farewell to the convicts. Well, that's the way it goes. It isn't the drug, but the dose that makes the poison. Well, we're done for today. Thank you for your attention. Tiring day. I can feel those hunger pains coming on. I guess I'll have to pick something up along the way. A nightcap will do me good.
Pra casa agora.
Good night, Mr. Ridley. The police will pick up the body and accompanying documentation in the morning.
Sure.
I guess there are actually two things in this world you can be certain of. Death and Ridley's reluctant attitude. Alright, maybe three things. My whiskey on the rocks when I get home.
Aê, mais um dia finalizado.
So cold. I guess I should have brought my jacket to work. This block can be quite intimidating when it's so quiet. What the fuck? But I locked it. I'm sure of it.
Invadir a casa dele. Capítulo 2.
Who the fuck did this? I don't have anything valuable. Money. They must have stolen the money. Great. That's all I need. Fuck! this, Red Pete? Where? I need my pills. I can't get my thoughts together. Christ, why did the neighbors not report anything? I'm calling Steven. Steven?
Now, Jack, I told you, I'm going for a drink with you for another night in a row.
That's not why I'm ringing. Although I could do with one. Someone broke into my apartment.
What? Did anyone see anything? Have you called the police yet?
No, I don't think so. Anyway, no one contacted me. As for the police, I'm calling right now, officer.
All right. Do you want me to head around? Look for any trace evidence?
I don't know. No, I guess not. Honestly, I don't have the strength to deal with it right now. I just want to lie down.
Are you sure? Because it's no trouble at all.
I think so. I'm sorry. I just wanted to calm down a bit. I don't know. That's probably some stupid joke. Only money was stolen.
Money? From Alice's box? Oh, fuck. Listen, I can come over. I have the key. I'll drop by, do what I need to do, and you go get some sleep.
No, don't trouble yourself. Lately, I've been just so tired and distracted. I don't know. Maybe I forgot to close the apartment door on my way to work. If anything else is missing, I'll let you know and call the police.
All right. Just make sure you close it tonight. If you see anything weird tomorrow, let me know. Whoever did this may be watching you.
I don't think anyone is dumb enough to come back.
You're probably right. Take care, Jack. If you need anything, call me.
I promise I will. Thanks, Steven. Sorry to bother you again. I've just been all over the place lately.
It's not a problem. Good night, Jack.
Good night. I guess I should clean this shit up. Where to start? There you go. To be honest, I could leave it like this. I'm glad this didn't. Maybe I could barricade the door. I should pack this thing away. I have no interest in. Now I'm sure Alice's family should really have some of these. That's enough for now. Jeez, I'm exhausted. I'll get the. What a mess. Now, if only I could blame this on the burglars.
Doideira, hein? Por que atacaram ele? Pegaram tiro.
That's enough. I need to quickly change and finish getting ready.
Eu já dormo já de tênis já.
I'm gonna be late for work again. Got my keys, got my files. Check. Oh yeah, I should take my pills. I feel like it takes me forever to finish these things. Time to go. Remember to close the door properly, Jack. I'll ask the neighbors tomorrow if they saw anything suspicious. I wonder if Ridley fixed the coffee machine.
Vamos lá, vamos lá.
Maybe a bit optimistic. I'd better grab a coffee on the way. I'm exhausted. I wonder who Stephen brought in today. Good morning, Mr. Ridley. Oh, he's not here yet? No, I'll do without him.
Amarrado. Quieta aí, Camila. Pelo amor de Deus, né?
Almost there.
A gente que está morta.
Now for the tough part. The body needs to be moved. Where's Ridley when you need him? All right. I just need some gloves and my apron. Then I can get to work. I'm going to need my tape recorder for this. Autopsy dated November 22nd, 1991. 7:32 p.m. Led by Dr. Jack Hanman. I begin by verifying the ending. It's most likely Harper Lloyd, age 35. Found in a well-owned house by her neighbors Leonard and Dorothy Chelsea. Report firefighters found the body after the Chelsea family began complaining that their tap water tasted strange, and at one point had begun to smell and turn a dark color. It is also known that the deceased was diagnosed with affective bipolar disorder. Harper was placed on drug therapy, which she dropped out of fairly regularly. During her, the last person who had contact with the deceased was her partner. Police records also show that Mrs. Lloyd was in constant conflict with her neighbors. The constant parties and subsequent brawls made living in the area nearly impossible, especially when
bichinho
Morris
dentro
Parker
jogar
wasn't
dentro
around.
do dela no
I proceed
negócio.
to open the bag. The most important task in forensic identification of a drowned person is to distinguish whether the death occurred before or after entering the water. Okay, that could have been worse. I carefully removed the victim's clothes so as not to damage the skin. The deceased was found. One shoe is missing. I'm going to need the camera to document all possible suspicious marks. Definitely the first thing that stands out is the very advanced post-mortem gigant. The skin of the deceased appears very delicate, smooth, and relaxed from being in the water for a long time. The whole body is extremely pale. Post-mortem markings are seen on the underside of the body. That is, on the back, thighs, and calves of the deceased. There are bruises and hemorrhages on the neck. These usually occur due to increased inhalation when fighting to breathe underwater. The so-called washerwoman's skin on the feet. The deceased had indeed been in the water for a long time. The skin on the hands can be easily separated from the body. The separation takes the form of a glove. There are some obvious scratches on the skin.
Inchado.
It's likely that the deceased was lying on her back when she was fished out. So, after the preliminary exam, it's time to take a closer look at this. Today's date. The deceased was clothed.
Dona Nadia.
Rigor mortis does not need to be checked.
E a nova.
Based on the state of decay, you can be sure it has
5
subsided.
anos, branca.
Where to start? We see thick white foam in the mouth of the deceased, resulting from pulmonary edema. Foam is a characteristic in deaths due to drowning. There are obvious scratches on the skin, especially on the back and hands. These could be defensive wounds,
Parece que alguém
evidence
matou
of some
ela.
sort of altercation prior to death. The spots have a purplish blue-red hue, which is a typical sign of the death of the organism. Yep, pretty typical. Liver mortis are formed as a result of putrefaction of blood in the veins. No obvious signs of struggle. The skin on the hands would have easily peeled away from the flesh. Some of the fingers have already lost their nails. Due to the fact that the deceased was wearing shoes all the time, her feet are in better condition than her hands. Nevertheless, we can still notice a clear, wavy skin and the so-called washerwoman's skin texture. Okay, that's probably enough to indicate it. I'd better note that down in the records. Marks found on the neck and foaming at the mouth are typical signs of drowning people. Those abrasions appear relatively fresh. No healing or scarring is visible. There doesn't seem to be anything unusual about this. Hands heavily wrinkled from submersion in water. Considering the deceased's penchant for drinking alcohol, diffuse spots are caused by blood rotting in the veins. Their liver mortis of a different color could indicate poisoning with carbon monoxide, cyanides, or nitrates. However, this is not the case here. That's all for now. Before I begin the dissection, I'll make sure the suggested identity is correct. The suitcase with the fingerprint equipment should be around here somewhere. Oh, here it is. With decomposing bodies, the tissue of the pads and the fingers tends to shrink. To remove these shrinkages, a mixture of glycerin or air is used. If the body of the deceased is well preserved, fingerprinting is similar to that of a living person. The fingerprint sheet should always be checked. Slipping fingers, too much or too little ink, or inaccurate hand position can make fingerprints illegible. I'm going to conduct a dactyloscopic examination. If in fact the deceased is in the police database, I will find her. Glycerin is injected successively between the nail and the skin of each finger. The substance then enters the fingertip, removing shrinkage and wrinkles.
Ah, pra ver o DNA dela.
Now I take a brush. Only when the skin is taut and elastic can you use ink. I think it's enough. I'm getting fingerprint samples. In the case of drowning victims, you have to be extremely careful. The skin may fall off the hand like a glove when you take the print.
Maneiro.
I'll use the fax machine to add the print into the system. button and...
Vamos lá.
Once the data uploads, I'll run the prints against the police database on the computer. Great. The data is there. Click Upload. Now, go through the database and find a matching print. Expect possible hours of fun. Analyze button. And we have a result. Everyone has a story to tell, even if it's just a police record. So, as predicted, the deceased turned out to be Harper Lloyd. That went smoothly. I'll print this out and attach it to the medical records. I wasn't sure, but the World Wide Web has been a blessing for speeding up my work. Great. Now I can go back to my inspection. I'm adding the name of the deceased. I'll start the internal examination by taking fluid from the victim's brain. A needle inserted through the nose will do the trick. If the victim was alive when she fell into the well, she must have swallowed water fighting for her life. And then diatoms, characteristics of pooled water like a well. In the meantime, I'll check the sample under the microscope. I'm sure that these algae traces will be found in the samples taken from the well where police found the body. Now I need to adjust the knobs properly and place the diatom in the aperture still needs adjustment. The image is too dark. I won't even notice an army of diatoms from this distance. Great. This way I'll see if I'm dealing with a large concentration of these algae. Perfect. It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid, but rather a bad focus. Oh, nah. Too much. Oh, I'm finally starting to see something here. I won't even notice an army of diatoms. Great. This way I'll see if I'm dealing with a large concentration of these algae. Perfect. Nah. Oh, I'm finally starting to see something here. I won't even notice an army of diatoms from this distance. Great. This way I'll see if I'm dealing with a large concentration of these algae. It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid. Perfect.
Bora, quem tá caçando aqui?
It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid, but rather a bad focus. The aperture still needs adjustment. Oh, I'm finally starting to see something here. Nah, too much. Oh, I'm finally starting to see something here. And perfect. I won't even notice an army of diatoms from this distance. Great. This way I'll see if I'm dealing with a large concentration of these algae. It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid, but rather a bad focus. And perfect. It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid, but and perfect.
Ué, agora? Como que a gente ia saber que o exame é esse? Que mapinha, galera? Voltamos ao procedimento.
It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid, but rather a Batman. Perfect. Nah. No. I'm finally starting to see something here. It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid, but rather a bad man. It's not a dirty lens, man. Perfect. It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid, but rather a bad focus. I won't even notice an army of diatoms from this distance. Great. This way I'll see if I'm dealing with a large concentration of... It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid. And perfect. As expected, we find the aforementioned algae in the solution. Their upper part, Epitheka, which overlaps the lower, Hypotheka, is clearly visible. The presence of diatoms in the brain samples taken indicate that the deceased was certainly alive when she fell into the water and was possibly... Since there were diatoms in the brain, it means that many more of them must have entered the body. Studies of the rest of the organs will most likely confirm this hypothesis. I can finally get to the practical part. I must be extra careful because the skin of the deceased is very stretched. I wouldn't want an explosion here. You can immediately see a very large swelling of the organs. In addition, all internal organs are very congested. I proceed to remove the rib cage. It's easy to see that the ribs have been imprinted in the lungs. So, I'm going to start by drawing blood from the lungs. If diatoms were only present in the lungs, this would mean that the victim was placed in the well after death, and the perpetrator wanted to get rid of the corpse in this way. Now, I remove the lungs and proceed to their examination. Taking the lungs in my hand, I feel that the tissues have lost their elasticity, which is the result of water emphysema. In addition, there is significant swelling of the organs, and as a result, we have a nice imprint of the ribs. The emphysema itself, it's clear how far it's... Corpses found in water are worth examining with a tomograph. However, I can't count on such luxuries, so I must reach for a more archaic technology. A bucket and water.
Vamos lá. Eita porra, que susto.
Ooh, I hope no one dipped a mop in it. It's best to go to the lab for this.
Bora dormindo e eu aqui. Tomando susto. Laboratório.
Historically, the lung float test is used to detect infanticide. The water should be at room temperature. That's enough. To test for this, I have to place the lungs in a container of water. This checks if there is air in the lungs. And speaking of lungs, everything is ready to bring them here. Of course, such a study isn't without flaws. Air may have entered a newborn's airways during resuscitation attempts. Gases released during decomposition could also give a false. In this case, however, it's about something else, namely, the amount of fluid in the lungs. To test for this, I have to place the lungs in a container of water and wait to see if they fall or if they will float on the surface. Just as I assumed, the lungs collapsed easily. Fluid could have entered the lungs during panic attempts to catch breath underwater, but it could also be the result of bacterial infections or cancer, so further investigation is needed. I move on to dissecting the lungs of the deceased. You can hear the distinct, very unpleasant crackling of the tissues being cut through. The parenchyma is remarkably pale, although small hemorrhagic foci and petechia are present on the surface. All right. Now, I will check the collected fluid under a microscope. If we find 20 diatoms on the slide, it can be considered drowning, and our result is not false positive due to possible contaminations. Let's see. I won't even notice an army of Oh, I'm finally starting to see something here. It's not perfect. Great. This way I'll see if I'm dealing with a large concentration of these algae. It's not a dirty lens, I'm afraid, but rather a bad focus. And perfect. As expected, in solution, the diatoms are clearly visible. There are smaller and larger clusters of them. There will definitely be more than 20 of them. I'll make a note of all this. So far, this case looks pretty standard. It's clear from the beginning that it's drowning. Well, the procedure requires me to check everything anyway. So I move on to checking the other organs. I ligate the heart, and that strongly developed putrefactic hemolysis of the organ can be seen at first glance. Apart from that, no signs of a heart attack or other heart disease.
Vamos ver.
I move on to the next organ. This time, it's the liver. It's immediately apparent that the deceased didn't care for herself. The beginnings of cirrhosis are visible in some areas. I transfer the organ to a board and proceed to dissect. The cross-section clearly shows dilated veins, and many small. I must admit that this is quite a feat, considering the rather young age of the deceased. Harper enjoyed drinking so much that she might not have lasted a few more years. I move on to the stomach. I take a sample of the fluid for testing. It looks very turbid. I'll see what happens after spinning, but that's in a moment. Now, I carefully ligate the organ, then cut it off. It's enlarged, probably full of putrid gases. I transfer it to the board and carefully open it, checking the contents. One thing you'd never get used to is how much this desk smells.
Vamos lá, vamos lá.
Okay, the stomach is full of fluid and unidentified organic matter, which is probably. So let's check the diatoms. Again, but in a centrifuge for a change. The problem with examining drowned people is being able to show whether the death was due to drowning or whether something else contributed to the death. Cramp, heart attack, drugs, homicide, or some accident. Such analysis requires viewing from different angles and a careful interpretation of the collected data, including those from the field. That's why it's so important to collect as many samples as possible. Unfortunately.
Vamos lá, vamos lá.
Okay, this is one last little sample. Now set.
Mano, no próximo vídeo a gente continua, fechou? Então até o próximo vídeo aí. Deixa eu botar isso aqui pra funcionar. E é nóis, hein? Valeu e fui!